Welcome to Bloodbath and Beyond. Today we review the indie horror film It Follows. This is the biggest abstinence PSA ever.
Written and directed by David Robert Mitchell, starring Maika Monroe and Keir Gilchrist. It Follows is about a woman who's followed by a supernatural force after a sexual confrontation. So what did we like?
I want to kick it off with the amazing soundtrack and score done by Disaster Piece. That was really reminiscent of like Goblin's 80s horror music.
It kept the tension like really high throughout the entire film. I thought this was an excellent twist on the normal theme of horror movies where we get teen angst, which usually ends up in death. In this movie, it was more of a slow burn where the teens had sex and then they were just like, they knew they were gonna die, but they were trying to avoid it and get away from it the entire time.
This entity is essentially an STD. It's only passed on through sex. Once somebody gets killed, then it's the next person in line, and it goes through the string of people that have had sex with each other. But it seems like it's how to deal with having an STD, because at first, Maika's kind of shunned by her friends because they don't believe her, and as the movie goes on, they start to become a little more comfortable with the situation, and you start to see other people in the film react to Maika's new conditions.
So the meaning behind it is extremely deep. You start not looking at what the character's looking at, but who's behind the character and which one of these people could be it.
I felt like I was looking in the background more than I was looking at the main characters and the central focal points. There are so many times where I was freaked out when nothing was happening.
And they were really clever with their jump scares in this one because they built it up in such a way that you didn't know if something was gonna like come out of the door, or if someone was just gonna pop in on screen.
There's so many times where I'm like, that's where it's gonna pop out, and then nothing would happen. Oh no, it was done brilliantly.
Touching on the cinematography, it was probably one of the best looking films that we reviewed on this show.
David Robert Mitchell clearly had a strong vision of what he was trying to get across here with his choice of colors and his choice of locations when he was shooting this film. And the choice of colors that he used between the bricks, the characters, pink was very evident throughout this film, and it just stood out and popped because they were trying to give that classic feel as though it was a throwback to old horrors from the late 70s to the early 80s.
Yeah, there's definitely a John Carpenter feel in this. Starting from the very first shot is the exact same shot from Halloween. And from that moment, the Halloween references do not stop throughout. There's even a shot in the classroom where Jamie's kind of freaking out. She's twirling her pencil just like Jamie Lee Curtis. And I don't know if that's a hint, but the lead character's name is Jamie. But she's sitting there in the classroom and she looks out the window and of course sees it.
So what didn't we like?
I found that their panning shots were not as in focused as they could have been. It almost hurt my eyes a little bit. It just moved too quick and you really couldn't pick up what they were trying to get across.
My major dislike is a little bit nitpicky, but it kind of comes down to how Jamie dealt with her situation. There were times where she was running to her friends for help. Other times, Jamie slept outside of her car on the goddamn hood. I think there's a lot of decisions like that are very small and they make for cool looking shots, but they're not the most practical.
For how much I enjoyed the pacing, I thought the movie was a bit too long. We had our final showdown and confrontation, and then it just kind of trailed off from there and it lingered for about 10 extra minutes than it needed to.
I felt the supporting cast didn't deliver their characters as well as it could have been. Just the development and the chemistry everyone had on screen, it almost felt like it was on two different levels.
Now it's time for our final thoughts and ratings.
It Follows definitely lived up to the hype. I know that's not going to be the same for everybody, but I really felt that this was better than The Babadook. I thought this was better than a lot of some of my favorite horror movies. The cinematography was fantastic. The story, the sound in this movie, the score was completely amazing. Probably the best score I've heard since Halloween, or maybe Starry Eyes. Through and through, this film from beginning to end kept me entertained and on the edge of my seat, looking in the background, trying to figure out where it is. So I'm gonna give this 5 its out of 5.
I completely agree with Jay. This film was probably one of my most anticipated films for 2015, and it lived up to the expectation. The soundtrack is phenomenal. The cinematography was great, the story was different, and there was so much deeper hidden meanings that you really need to look past what the story is about to fully understand it. There's a few plot points that I wasn't too impressed with, and the overall characters were not that strong for me, but it was still a good film. And that being said, I'm gonna give this 4 chillin' in the pools out of 5.
This was unlike the cheesy horror that we're used to watching. It Follows was very suspenseful, and it just kept me on edge the entire time. I thought the soundtrack was spectacular, and I just love this movie as a whole. I thought it was very well put together, and I highly recommend it to everybody. So with all that said, I'm gonna have to give this movie 5 Playing with Flowers out of 5.
As always, thank you for watching. Like this video, and if you've seen It Follows, let us know what your thoughts were in the comments below. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. And if this is your first time here, please subscribe to the channel to stay updated with everything we're doing here on Bloodbath and Beyond.